So today's talk is a little different than the others. I guess they're all different. And this one's titled, I wish I knew this and that before I took my new job. So the question is, usually there's some very basic things you ask, like, hey, what are the benefits? What's my time off? What am I going to get paid? And I've found that there are a bunch of things about the way that companies operate that change the experience that you have and change how well you like working there, or whether it works out or that kind of thing. So I'm going to go through 17 items that will basically be some things that you might want to think about or dig in when you are looking at or seriously considering another job that you're not taking just because you need to eat. So the first one is the hiring level and job title. I know this sounds ridiculous, but it turns out that the title, and not because it's a title that's interesting on your resume, can dramatically affect how much you make or how you're plugged in. So at a lot of companies, especially financial institutions, but other places, a director title is a serious title, and it changes your bonus plan in ways that they never tell you. It changes your severance packages. It changes which meetings you get invited to and how you're connected. And there are non-management titles that actually line up against the management title so that they have the same job level. So if you're on the technical track, there are usually one or two technical jobs, if the place has got their act together, that actually have titles that line up with the director title. And at all possibility, those are the ones you want. It is a major difference in pay and in how well you're connected. So you got to pay attention to those job title differences. And one of the questions is, hey, you may get pitched to get hired at a lower title, but you could actually be rated higher and you could actually make more at the lower job than you would at the higher job. And that's true, but the reality is it's a lot easier to get hired into a job level than it is to get promoted to it, unless something major happens. So, and some companies know this so much that they have people that leave and come back and get hired at the next level up, because it's actually faster to do that than do it in the organization. I know of a couple companies that actually give you all your vesting back. So if you work there 5 years and you leave for a year and come back at a higher job level, you actually get the 5 years vesting still. So do not necessarily count on getting promoted. You want to get hired in at the highest possible title. There is risk because you may be downrated against other people who have been in that job, but that's your decision to figure out which way you want to go on that. Another one is reorganization cadence. How often and how quickly does an organization reorg? Because some organizations do that because they're dynamic. Other ones, it creates chaos, right? It is a big deal. I got hired at a place in Nova where between the time I got my offer, the time I agreed to work there and the time I started, there was a reorg. And there was another reorg 6 weeks after that. And so there were two reorgs within like 2 or 3 months of each other. And that totally blew up our organization and made us ineffectual. So you really need to look at, hey, how often do they reorg? And is there a good reason for it? Like, did they buy a company and were they forced to reorg? Or did they just do it while they try and figure out what they're doing? If you're lower in the organization, this doesn't matter to you. But I've also seen cases where companies will reorg, in fact, the same company, and they would reorg, and whole teams would be left outside of the organizational from the purpose of having work to do, and then those teams had to go find work to do. Now, before the reorg, there was actually plenty of work to do, but when they reorged, not only did they change priorities, sometimes they just forgot certain things were important and left people with nothing to do. Another one is team handcuffs. So if you get hired into a company, they can talk about mobility all they want, but there is always some kind of handcuff provision, either over the long haul or the short haul. I started with a company and it was clear that I wasn't going to work on that team or with that boss within 30 days. But that company actually had a 9-month handcuff. So whatever team you were on, you were stuck on it for 9 months. And you want to do that so people don't just bail when they have trouble. But at the same time, it means that that person's going to end up with 9 months on that team and then probably get downrated. And then they're going to be in trouble, right? So it's not that you want the ability to move immediately, but you would like the ability to move if something doesn't work out or if it's apparent that that team, something else is happening. So it's just, what is their policy on that for when you get into a position? Another one is cross calibrations. So some companies do a thing where they basically just rank you and you're good to go. Other companies actually cross-calibrate people across departments or inside of a department of a few hundred people, and they'll rate those. And then if they use the Jack Welch model, they'll actually cut the bottom 10%. And I've worked places where it was mandatory that the bottom 10% get cut. And so in that case, it all came down to people's manager. Like, was that manager good in a room talking about their people? Because basically, everybody's got a person, like in a 20 or 30 person team, they'll have a couple people that, one person that might not work out. But when they have to suddenly come up with 2 or 3 or 4 of those because some other team's got strong players, then suddenly, average or decent people get put on the block based on how good their manager is. So it's something to be aware of. I would always ask, hey, is there a cross calibration? How does it work? And is there mandatory curve fitting? Is it a Jack Welch style event? Another one, which I was never aware of, was, is this the best time of year to join? Some places will have a rule that says you can only get a raise after you've been there a year, and raises are only given at year end. So that means if you join the company in January, February, or March or whatever, you actually have to go a year and 3 quarters before you're entitled to a raise. So that's a long time, and you may need to take that into account when you ask for your salary, because you're not asking for this year's salary, you're asking for next year's salary. So the thing to ask is, hey, what is the raise and promotion cycle, and where am I going to be in that? So when does it happen, and how long do I need to be in one place before that actually happens? That can actually have a major impact on your kind of long-term income and also kind of your happiness, because if you're like 11 months in and you can't get a raise, you might not be very happy. Another one is internal promotion policy. So there's two ways people do this. One of them is you can apply up to any position, and then you have to interview, and you may or may not get it. So I'm a senior developer, and I want to be a manager, or I want to be a distinguished developer, or something like that. And so those places you actually apply up, and they decide whether they're going to give you the job. There are other places that you have to get promoted in place, because you can never apply for a promoted job. So the Jack Welch style company I was talking about, Innova, in their case, you actually can't apply for a promoted position. They would actually have to create an opening at your level, which is lower, and then you would apply for that, and then you would get promoted based on the promise of that management still being there and that they would make that happen. So there are 2 different styles to that. One is to stop people from job hopping up. I get why they do that, but it can cause major issues, because the other thing that happens is if my boss promotes me, then suddenly I'm eligible for a whole bunch of other positions that I wasn't eligible before. So do they want to promote me? They do, but at the same time, it's bad, because every time you promote your good person, they're suddenly eligible to leave. Now, they could have applied up before, but that would have been a different process in a different company. Hiring manager assurances. So there are times when hiring managers will tell people stuff like, I'll get you this raise, or I'll get you this promotion, or we have a promotion cycle coming up soon. Those promises are good for that person, but from a company point of view, they're vapor. So if they are always reorging, then there's a reasonable chance you won't have the same boss by the time that promise had to be delivered. I know a person in the same place in Nova, he had like 9 managers in 2 years. So that meant no manager that made a promise to him was still around by the time a review, a raise, or a promotion cycle actually happened. So you should never, especially at a larger company where they're bound by practice, you should never base your decision on promises that are made. There is a good chance that person will not be your boss or even in your food chain when that happens. And also, it may be against policy for them to do that. I would also ask about average tenure and attrition rates. So a place could have great retention because nobody is motivated to leave. It could also have great attention because it's a great place to work. They could have short tenure and high attrition. It would look like because they're growing, and so it looks like attrition, but people are really just being moved into other teams. I would really check on this. I've worked at a place and we had over 20% attrition in the departments, and that was just, there was nothing they could do about it. Now, like 10% of that was on purpose, but 10 or 15% people just left, right? And part of that was the way the review cycles, and part of it was just the working environment lent itself to a certain personality style. So, what's the tenure on this team? Hey, I'm building a new team. Are they really building a new team? Or did the entire previous team leave, and so they're building a new team? You got to find out. Balancing salary and bonus, that's really your thing. You got to look at how bonuses are calculated. and when they're offered, you will find companies with bonuses. A lot of people will leave right after the bonus period. They'll do as good as they can and then bolt, and suddenly you'll have this high attrition. It tells you that people were really unhappy and the bonus worked to retain them, but it also means that as soon as they got the bonus, they left. So you got to think about how that works and how you're eligible. Like a lot of places, they'll tell you a bonus, but then it turns out in your first year, you only get a prorated bonus because you're not there for the whole year. And they know you're not very useful in the beginning. So whatever bonus they tell you probably doesn't apply for the first year. That's the bonus, and that's the bonus vesting thing. There are other kinds of benefits where you're vested, and you really need to find out. So like a signing bonus is a year, is it 4 years paid monthly? That vesting boundaries tend to be where people leave, and also the higher up you are, you get the bigger bonuses, but the vesting will be longer. So a senior developer might have a 1 year bonus, and a director might have a 2 year bonus, 2 year vesting, because they got a lot larger bonus. Familial bonds and nepotism. This is mostly in smaller outfits. You'll see it. All the major players or family members are related. As long as you like working there and you don't expect anything to happen, it's pretty rare that they're going to break those bonds. It's just something to be aware of. I've worked a place, and I know other people who work places like that. Some of them are amazing, and some of them are just like, there's no recourse. There's no HR. It's just the family. Diversity. I always check now to see kind of what the diversity policies are. Do they actually seem to mean it? Do they do training around it? Do they hold events with it? Do they have Slack channels where they talk about it? Like, well, how do they make that happen? And are they open? Even the best places will blow it. Like at the same place, they talked a good talk, and I saw some really good action, but there are a couple of times when they'll blow it because there'll be corners in the company. So you can't go by a corner. You got to kind of get a feel for the whole thing. So manager ratings and incentives. If you're hired as a manager, there's some weird stuff that goes on in some of these places. So sometimes you'll get rated or you'll get promoted based on the number of promotions you do, or you'll get dinged based on your retention. Some places don't care how many people a manager loses. Do you really want to work in a group where the manager has no incentive to keep people? But at the same time, I've seen places where they do the Jack Welch thing, and so they're required as an org to cut 10 to 15% of their people. And so managers will actually get dinged because if they got rid of all their deadwood earlier in the year and had a good team at the end of the year, there's a reasonable chance they'll have to give up good people. And there is nothing worse than being a manager, building a good team, getting dinged for building a good team, and then losing some of your good people because of the way the company actually operates. I would also look at benefits versus how they're described versus what's actually by policy. I worked at this company in Northern Virginia, and they had a vacation policy that was de facto, and it was told to me by the recruiter, and everybody else that got hired around the same time I did got told the same policy. But the policy manual actually said something different, and my spouse was like, what do you do and believe in these people? We got all new management because of a reorg, and people came in from the outside. They had never heard of this policy, and they implemented what was in the policy guide, which was their right. But there was an uproar because a lot of people had email and stuff in writing that said that the policy for this department, which was like 10,000 people, actually was different than what was in the policy guide. So that can be a little stressful. If anybody tells you something that sounds really good, make sure you get it in an email or writing. The other one, last one, I think is going to be company. Oh man, I was going to try and do this in 10 minutes. Company managed benefit accounts. So you can end up in some weird situations. Like an FSA could be great, but I would check around and figure out how they manage their FSA and some of their benefit accounts. I worked at a place and they basically bounced back every dental because the FSA is partially funded by them, and if they turn it down, they don't have to pay their part and they save a bunch of money. That same company referred multiple people I knew to the IRS for medical fraud when nothing bad had actually happened. They just didn't like the receipts, so they send it to the IRS and let the people argue with the IRS. And this is for FSA money that was the person's own money, right? So the company actually implemented a policy to save money that was not required by federal law. So I would check around. And the best way to do some of that is use public resources. So you can look, Glassdoor is a great example, at least at the time of this recording. You can find out all kinds of interesting stuff, not just about money, but what happened. The other one is LinkedIn. Find people that are 1 or 2 links away from you or people that used to work there and hit them up and find out what's happening. I forgot to do this on a job and I would have saved myself a bunch of stress if I had I had like 3 people I knew at this company, the same one I'm talking about before. And if I had asked any of them, I probably wouldn't have gone there, but there were some things that were amazing. But a year after I got there, all 3 of those people had left and none of them had been there more than 3 years. So there are some stuff you can get out of your LinkedIn piece. I guess the last one would be sometimes there are local forums, like in DC area, there's this DC Urban Moms, which is a completely different topic, but they talk about all the major companies and what their benefits and how they treat their employee. So that's it. These are the things I wish I knew before I took a new job. And the next time I take a new job, I think I'm going to try and dig into a little of these and understand they might not stop me from taking the job, but I don't like being surprised, and neither should you.